I don't think a marketer's job is to be creative, honestly.
Should I join marketing if I'm a creative brain or if I'm a strategic brain?
Making creatives is like the 10th step of what a marketer really needs to do.
Would you say that doing an MBA today is a must to get into a large FMCG company?
I've stuck to FMCG not because I was obsessed with FMCG, but because I was obsessed with marketing. Everybody's just saying, oh, client ने ये brief दिया, चलो 2 दिन में turn around करके देना है तो दे देते हैं. Where is the application of the mind? Where is the questioning that's happening? Where is the value addition that's happening?
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with Indiefolio. Today we have Gauri Malhotra with us, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Bombay Shaving Co. Gauri's career spans over 15 years, where she's worked with some incredible companies like Marico as well as Dr. Vaidya's. We talk about her role at Bombay Shaving Co., talk about a lot of advice for young marketeers, and unpack a lot about her journey. Thanks a lot for your time and welcome to the podcast, Gauri.
Thank you, Kavan.
When I look at your career, I think it's something a lot of marketers aspire to kind of follow, right? Working on the agency side, then jumping to the brand side, working with some of the top FMCG companies. But before I get into all of this, my first question always is to understand, Gauri, when is it that you decided that marketing is going to be your career choice?
I think for me, it was back in college, like when I was 20, 21 years old. And as a young student trying to make some extra buck, I was, joined these research agencies, taking questionnaires and getting them filled for like 500 rupees of earning per questionnaire. And I think that's when I realized that just meeting consumers, unpacking what they feel, building something for them is so powerful. And I think that's when I decided this is broadly the space I want to get into. And then, of course, from there on, I tried to explore different facets of marketing to see whether it was really what I wanted to do.
Very interesting. So traditionally, marketers are supposed to be creative people who create ads, is what people think when they are picking up this particular career. But today, it seems to be a lot more strategic and data driven. So people are very confused, right? Should I join marketing if I'm a creative brain or should I join marketing if I'm a strategic brain? What's your answer for that?
I don't think the definition of marketing has changed forever. It's unfortunate that the interpretation of marketing has been pretty limited and very lopsided in a few cases, right? So like you said, I don't think a marketer's job is to be creative, honestly. The marketer's job is to create brands, to find market need gaps, to build profitable businesses and brands. That's the core of what a marketer needs to do, right? And for that, of course, one needs to start from the consumer, be very first principles oriented to say, okay, what does the person want? Where is a genuine need gap? What's the proposition? What's the positioning? At what pricing will this really take off? And at what points of distribution should it be available? Like a pulse would not work if it's a quick com first strategy today, right? It has to be a pan strat, and that's the GTM that it has to do. But a 1,000 rupee shampoo can be a very e-commerce, quick commerce first. So I think availability and levers of distribution are also very, very core to what marketing is. Then comes the entire part of, okay, this is what we want to do. Now let's translate this for the consumer in a creative manner. Making creatives is like the 10th step of what a marketer really needs to do. But of course, it's what one sees as an outcome, right? And therefore, it's the most fascinating step for young students, for people who don't understand what the core of marketing is. But I just feel it's always been this, right? It's the job of people in marketing to also clarify this as we go further, because in today's world where everything feels social first and everything feels about creating interesting content, one forgets that that's just the communication that comes after a lot of thought. And it's not just about taking your phone and going to 20 places and just shooting randomly and putting stuff online, right? That's my take on that.
I'm glad, you had a very definitive answer, because often people say it's everything or it's both. Another aspect I want to touch upon is product development as well, right? Often when you want to create a profitable company or a brand, one is communication, one is understanding the consumer insight, but it essentially comes down to the product. Even in marketing, if you look at all the P's, product development is a key part of it. Can you tell a little bit more about a marketeer's role in shaping a product?
It's the first P. A lot of the time that gets spent actually on mining need gaps translates to a product brief first. And it really needs to be very detailed and in depth. So the R&D is also very clear on what they're working on. Back in Marico, we did serums, right? And Live On was one of the brands that we had. Again, over there to just understand consumer need gaps to say, okay, a lot of people are actually now on the go. They're not only taking care of their hair when they're at home in front of the mirror. So can we create something which can be an on-the-go serum? But then we realized actually on hair, the serum is a slightly thicker product. So on dry hair, it doesn't work. It needs wet. So we said, okay, can we create a product which has a combination of water and serum? So that when somebody sprays it, it first wets the hair and then puts a layer of serum deposition on it. Now, that's a very core insight for giving a product brief, right? And I think that's how it kind of comes together.
Working with a company like Marico is something a lot of people aspire to do, especially in the younger part of your career. And you were there for almost 14 years. Would you say that doing an MBA today is a must to get into a large FMCG company? Or can you combat that with maybe having more work experiences and internships?
I think it's far more fluid now. When I joined, I think the only way to enter a large FMCG was through MBA. And today, of course, hiring from startups, hiring from people who've just done different scales of businesses, 0 to 1 is really sought after. So yeah, I think all of that has become far, far more fluid than what it was 10, 15 years ago. And I'm glad it has.
What does a company like a Marico look like for a young marketer, right? What should I signal so I become an attractive candidate for them?
For a lot of these companies, there are two parts to being hired, right? One is the skill that one brings in, and the second is just pure attitude. At least I believe in it very strongly that attitude is far, far, far more superior than the skill, right? If you've got the right willingness to kind of get there, you will acquire the skills. So always hire for aptitude first. And I think that's what Marico always believed in. That's a large part of how companies that know themselves well hire for, because they know the culture they have, the kind of culture they want to build, and the kind of homogeneous group that they want to get, because you want to have people who think similarly, who bring in their nuances, but fit into a larger scheme of things to be able to work like a well-oiled machinery. And I think very few organizations know that about themselves. And Marico is definitely one of the stellar examples of it, right?
That's very well put. Another thing, Gauri, I want to talk about now is generally category focus. So many, young marketeers, maybe they've done their first 1-2 jobs. They are in a dilemma that should I stick with the same category or should I, have a versatile, experience? Obviously, there is no right or wrong answer, but could you give your take as to why you stuck to FMCG as a focus area and what are the benefits of sticking to one category or rather one industry?
This is my learning from how I think I could have navigated my career a little better. But this is what I feel about marketing as a discipline, right? That the fundamental skill set of marketing, irrespective of the industry, remains the same. If you're good at being able to understand P&L, understanding consumers, if you're fundamentally clear about building products and identifying their PMFs and their market potential, it doesn't matter what category you're working on, right? Because that's the core. And then learning about a category is about spending a little bit of time in it. Of course, that will come with a learning curve of 3 to 6 months. But to me, does it feel like there is a significant advantage of sticking in one category for long? I don't think so. I've stuck to FMCG not because I was obsessed with FMCG, but because I was obsessed with marketing. And I was looking at great opportunities that helped me build my marketing skill.
Absolutely. I want to now, touch a little bit upon any marketing myths you've picked up, over the years, which you'd like to debunk for any young marketers out there.
Oh God. The first is definitely marketing is about creating ads. I mean, let's just get over that for once and for all. I have not created a piece of advertising in the last couple of years, apart from one, I think. I think the second is also, and now having worked with large budgets and on the frugal side, media monies defines the strength of marketing. I think another really big myth, right? And today we know how valued bootstrap thinking or frugality is. And would you say, for instance, minimalist is not a great brand? I don't think anybody's going to say that, right? But they've been frugal and profitable all through and built a great brand. The third thing which I feel people want to do less and less of, just being in touch with reality. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, me and my surroundings is equal to the consumer, which is such a dangerous trap. And therefore, people in SECC behave like this. Like, what kind of thinking is this? I think constantly tell yourself that unless you go out there and meet people living that life, there is no way you'll be able to make a good decision about what to sell to them.
Awesome. I think very important myths to bust. There's the famous quote of Henry Ford, right, where he says that if I asked my customer what they wanted, they'd say, I want a faster horse. So sometimes I will just do what I think is right. Even Steve Jobs is famous for having that kind of a mentality. So many opinions going around, which confuses a marketer and even an entrepreneur, right? That how do I really define a consumer insight? How many people do I speak to? And when do I really know that I'm sitting on an insight which can lead to a product innovation? So if you could kind of unpack that for us, even maybe give an example in your career, would be really helpful.
It's wrong to view it as an either or. Disruptive innovations have come from leaps of faith. And that's possibly the only way. Knowing that is really important. And for that, again, it's not just about going and saying, hey, Kavan, what is it that you feel your food should be able to give you, which it doesn't currently? You're not going to be able to answer it, right? But if I look at you as a person and say, okay, what does Kavan do? What does his day look like? What are the high points of his day? What are the low points? Where does he feel that he's missing energy, nutrition, etc.? I know. I mean, and if I speak to 20 people like this, I'd probably build a pattern of what could be potential answers to those. So unfortunately, we treat research or insights as somebody's using my product. I have to go and ask, how is it? How do you find it? Great, not great? That's just taking feedback. And that's one part of insights. But there's this entire world of saying, let's just live the consumer's life. And there are so many different ways of doing this research. And we've done this in the early years, right? And go and stay with consumers in their home and villages and live that day for 2 days and just see what they go through, because that's when you really feel what's missing or what could help them, right? Or just stand at aisles of modern trade stores and observe the way people shop, because sometimes they pick up something and they say, and they keep it back, and something's missing, and what you can follow up on, right? One such fabulous innovation, of course, that Marico did with Sapola oats 10, 12 years or maybe more back, but again came from a very simple insight, right? That oats are, from a product standpoint, oats are healthy but disgusting to eat, right? So can we solve that? The other part of it is that oats is always treated as healthy by moms who are the breakfast makers or control the kitchen. They want to give healthy choices constantly, and there's always the trade-off between health and taste, right? And that's what Safola tried to bridge. Say, bring in oats, but what does Indian palate like? Masala. So let's add masala in oats and package it. It sounds really simple now, but of course a lot went behind just meeting, observing so many people. So sometimes a lot of these come from there. And you're right. I think a lot of the tech first innovations where consumers can't imagine what they want. But Apple do consumers want to live life easy and simplify the way they do things 100%. Sometimes you just need to go out and meet people who would be representative of the kind of sample or population. It doesn't always have to be 30, right? It could be 5, but it could be 5 really high quality, in-depth conversations in their house, cooking food with them in their kitchen to be able to understand some of this, right?
You mentioned observing your customer by going to your modern trade stores, etc. As a CMO, how often do you do that? Do you still get time?
I do it lesser than I'd like to. But one of the things that we track within our team is how many market working days and how many consumer working days is each one of us doing. And we try to hold each other accountable for it and percolate it down to the junior members as well. So that's something that's definitely part of what I do, what the team does. I'd love to do more, but we all definitely do it. Like, I love going to consumers' houses and sitting there and meeting them rather than, calling them somewhere and saying, ki chalo, आप आ गए हैं हमारे ऑफिस में in our comfort zone. Now you tell us. They're never going to be able to tell us.
That's great to hear. I think that shows how customer centric, I guess, you folks are. Coming to some of your campaigns, I saw the Be Sensy one, and I think I see a lot of humor used. What's your take on using humor the right way in campaigns?
See, so for us also, I think, and as it must for most campaigns, I don't think it started with we want to use humor to do something. The starting point was to say that, okay, we've got an incumbent that we're up against. What is the archetype that we want to be able to stand true to ourselves and also be quite away on the archetype wheel, right, from the incumbent. That's where and as a brand, we're very outlaw. Shantanu's out there doing his podcast, putting out posts, putting his point of view. So we knew that our point of view on the world is going to be an outlaw maverick-ish point of view, which is quite distant from where a competition is placed, right? When we were clear on that, and when we were clear on the kind of product proposition that we wanted to put out, which is to say young consumers today don't just think about how great a shave it is, but they're more concerned about their skin. And men are equally conscious about their skin today as women are. And what makes them think twice about shaving is putting a blade to their skin, which is damn sensitive at that age, which is 18 to 20, 21, right? So that was the core insight. And that's where we came with something sensitive on skin, supported with aloe, and therefore called Sensy. Now marry Sensy and Maverick as a word. There's a take which becomes very obvious, which is Sensy and non-Sensy, right? So try Sensy and ditch anything that's non-Sensy to your skin. So that's why the campaign took birth. But again, I think I keep going back to this, that never at the cost of first principles. Should we do humor because it's the in thing? 100% not. Should we do humor because that's core to what the brand is and what the proposition is and because it stands out beautifully? Absolutely, yes. I think that's when long-term equity also gets built, right? Otherwise, putting out an asset which has humor in it is going to have a short life unless that's something that one wants to build consistently over years, like Fevicol has. Beautiful. And it's one brand that stands out on how it's leveraged humor because it's absolutely core to the brand.
No, another characteristic thing about your campaigns is using your team and your founder in many things you do. In fact, I actually got introduced to your brand through the Barbershop podcast, but it seemed like an odd thing, right? Okay, why is a brand like yours doing something like this? Can you talk a little bit more about why, as a brand, you took that up as something you're consistently focusing on, and how important it is for the founders today now to be involved as the face of the brand?
Couple of things, right, that were working for Shantanu as well as the barbershop with Shantanu when he started out. One, of course, huge respect for him and his point of view that started getting built. A lot of following by young professionals as well as young students started increasing as the podcast kept scaling and becoming big. And third, just the way Shantanu is and he puts out his point of view is very, very aligned with the way we wanted to build Bombay Shaving Company. So there's so much of coherence between, and Shantanu is a really well-known personality today, right? So we keep telling him that when we see him go to a college, we see kids queuing up to take a photo with him. So we said, wow, there is something fabulous in the making, in the way he's connecting with young students. And because we see that happening and we know that that's the kind of brand we want to build, there's a lot of synergy between what he stands for, what he's building through the podcast and his own personality, and where we want to be as a brand and what we stand for, right? And that's the reason we kind of got it together. And, you know, we've always talked about why use celebs in ads. And the only answer is it gives you immediate eyeballs, right? It gives you some degree of memorability. And for us, Shantanu is ticking the same boxes.
I see a lot of founders today now turning to content creation as well, right? They have their own podcast, they're very active on LinkedIn, they're co-building with the community. Is that necessary according to you? Do you think that that's a great way for a young company to be more relatable?
100%. I think it's necessary because that's the way the consumer is consuming content today. 5 to 6 hours are being spent on social media by the core consumers. It just becomes one of the places where you can't go amiss. I think it's just a lot of information that's becoming so democratized for people today that it's absolutely fabulous for the country as a whole, I feel. So, And whoever does it well, of course, reaps the benefit. And it's difficult to do. I'm sure you know how tough it is to kind of stay at it and keep at it and put out content that you feel matters, because there's also so much rubbish out there.
Right.
To be able to do that consistently is quite a skill.
I want to now go to the last part of the podcast now. Content creation. It's something personal to what we do. And as you know, we are a network of a lot of freelancers, consultants, agency owners in the creative space. There's a lot of anxiety and tension going on with respect to generally creative outsourcing today. And there are two main components with it, right? Companies, are now, they've moved away from this AOR model traditionally, and they've started working with more and more agencies, more and more studios, and even freelancers. If, I'm a creative founder, I'm running my own studio, and I'm kind of figuring out my life right now, what do you think is the need of the hour when it comes to creative outsourcing for a CMO, right? What do you think an agency owner must do to actually deliver well and attract the right clients right now?
It's a tough one, right? Because we've gone through exactly the same cycle that you talked about, and I think outsourcing, insourcing, AOR, the call becomes two. How close are you to the brand? Are you living, breathing it, and understand it intimately, right? And not just the broad strokes of it. And of course, because the amount of things to churn out has become so much, the cost consciousness has become that much higher, right? So earlier you do one piece of advertising for lakhs and be so comfortable with it, right? And today, you've still got the same lakhs or much lesser, but to put out, say, 50 pieces of content. So that's the reality that I think all of us are kind of dealing with. And while we have an in-source team, I think one of the places that I think organizations struggle with on is, how do we think beyond the limited pool of ideas that we keep generating? And I see that problem will always remain. Fortunately or unfortunately, when one is working on a bunch of performance ads or a bunch of reels in-house, as humans, our tendency is to fall in love with the work we do. So we want to do more of it. And over a period of time, we justify what we do. And it's more and more difficult to step back and take a bird's eye view of where is this really taking us. Extended partners who can bridge that gap will be really valuable. Right? Be able to step back and bring in a perspective that the smaller team is not able to see. It's not a competition. It's what the two teams build together for the brand at large, bringing a fresh perspective, being able to build consistency for the brand. And that's why AORs were loved, because they understood your brand and they would make sure no matter what, you kind of don't deviate from the brand book. And I remember so many agency conversations back in the day where they came and said, but you're giving us a brief which is not on brand. Are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, oh wow, here is an agency creative person asking me this question. It was fabulous, but nobody's asking that question today, because everybody's just saying, oh, client ने ये brief दिया, चलो 2 दिन में turn around करके देना है तो दे देते हैं. So where is the application of the mind? Where is the challenging? Where is the questioning that's happening? Where is the value addition that's happening? And, whether we like it or not, it will be needed. It's for some brands, it's needed sooner in the journey. For some brands, it's needed once you realize, okay, we've done the same stuff for the last 2 years. We don't really know what more this can do. And I think agencies who understand this and who are able to approach clients through this problem-solving partnership and force that time on understanding the brand, on challenging the brief, are going to do much better in the longer term.
The other aspect of AI is also really making a lot of people sweat, right? What AI is doing is it's really replacing creative production. So if the person has the right questions, the right context, and the right brief, eventually, maybe not now, maybe 5 years down the line, right, you can prompt it out, which makes me wonder that the person with the context and the brief is the marketer, right? They know exactly what they want and why it'll work. I would love to know your perspective as a CMO. Do you think that marketeers would then be tasked to become creators as well, because it's as good as prompting it out, and you yourself can become a creator today?
Is AI going to enable broadening creative thinking or take away creator block? 100%. Right. And I think there are so many examples in which it's doing it. And like there are times when I'm stuck with certain propositions and I'm just typing it out with a context, with a prompt, and putting it, feeding in competition, and just trying to generate some stuff, right? And I think that part is really valuable. Are our creative teams using it to generate interesting backgrounds, make some quick perf ads? Yes, 100%. Is that going to continue to happen? It will. Will it scale? It will scale. Will there be a point where everything looks a bit artificial, and will sameness catch up? I think so as well, right? I think the smarter people will know how to leverage AI to generate more ideas, to widen perspective, to go into uncharted territories, to be able to, the classic what 3D rendering and mood boards took forever, they will happen in seconds, right? So it's a great way to segue into what one really wants to create. And that's how people who use that well, I think will kind of shine through better than otherwise. But will it replace creative completely? Unless the DNA of humans change, I don't think so.
I love the last line. That essentially brings us to the last question. You've definitely given a lot of advice to young marketers, but as a parting thought, if anybody today who's hearing this wants to become a CMO one day and they're in the early stages of their career, what's one advice you have for them which you'd like to share, which can help them build a successful career and help them become a CMO one day?
So I think two things. One is never shy away from the fundamentals. It seems boring and it seems like below the intellectual level at that scale, but it's also important because one doesn't know what it's a little bit like Johari's windows, right? You don't know what you don't know. And that's what going into the depth kind of tells you. So do a sales stint, go to the market, meet people on the streets. It's irreplaceable. Thank God for FMCGs who make marketers go through that for the first couple of years. And second, I think it's one of my really early managers told me that to be able to see through some kind of life cycle of a brand, you need to spend 2-3 years on it. Because you see an idea, you create an output, you see it work out or not work out in market. You go back and iterate. You kind of put out something that completes the loop. So sometimes I feel it's also really important to be able to see through what you're creating and what you're building and how it's doing in market and what you need to change, right? And to be able to have this realization that it's not just about creating 5 ads, right? It's about seeing whether they moved business, what worked in it, to be able to go back and say, okay, this is my revised brief. This is where I was wrong. This is where I was right. Therefore, how do I scale from here? I just feel seeing that life cycle is really important. So while shifting jobs for better pay, for fancier looking designation is very, very lucrative, but should not be done at the cost of, seeing through life cycles of brand.
Fantastic. That's some golden advice. And thank you so much, Gauri. It's been a pleasure hearing you. I hope you had fun.
I had a lot of fun, Kavan. Thank you. I mean, it's just nice to kind of live through your journey also, and it helps one reflect to themselves what they've done and not done, and where we stand today. So super nice to have this chat with you, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. I'm glad. For everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to hear another marketing leader like Gauri, please like, share, and subscribe. A new episode will come out very, very soon.